Tumty tiddly hum, tumty tiddly hum.
Right, I'm going to get started this time with no nonsense.
No nonsense indeed.
It's a special.
You're special.
I know I am.
Oh, that's definitely gobhoblin.
Did you say Godpoblin?
No. What makes you think that?
That's what I heard.
Maybe your ears are back to front.
Uh-huh. Are you ready?
Yeah.
I'm clearly not. Hello Internet, I'm Fireball.
Bah!
You evil shit!
Well, I was just introducing the episode.
That's gonna clip like hell!
I didn't actually, because it would come up with a warning if it had.
Yeah, just doing it right in my ear, so it felt like it.
Have you got tinnitus now as well?
I play the instruments, of course I have tinnitus.
And I'm the orbiter.
Welcome to our Halloween special.
Be afraid. Be
year,
very afraid.
This year we're doing a podcast because this year Halloween's on the day that we'd normally release a podcast. Well, it's on the in-between week, so we're doing an extra podcast for Halloween. Exciting stuff.
And I'm drinking Hobgoblin in celebration of all things Halloween.
That took you a long time.
I couldn't think of anything to say.
Anyway, do you want to just get on with newsy bits?
Yeah, okay, suppose.
Or is there anything else you wanted to talk about first?
Don't know.
I'm back at school tomorrow.
Are you scared?
Yeah.
What are you scared of? People.
And waking up at 7 o'clock. Well,
You don't wake up at 7 o'clock. I wake up at 7 o'clock.
7:30 usually, eventually.
Yeah. About 20 minutes after I've started trying to wake you up.
I'm a heavy sleeper and I'm not supposed to be getting up at that time. My body isn't designed for it.
And mine is.
I don't know, you're old.
I've had more years of sleep abuse, I suppose.
Uh-huh. Anyway, so news-wise, I mean,
Things and stuff.
the day that this goes out was the Brexit. Have they actually given an extension yet, or is that still up in the air?
They have said that they are going to, and by the time this goes out, they will have said how long it's going to be for. I think, but as things stand at the moment, because this is Sunday,
have the 27 voted on an extension?
Yes, that they've all agreed unanimously to grant an extension, but they haven't decided how long for yet. They're waiting for the UK to sort their lives out, and the UK are kind of waiting to see how much the extension granted is. There's going to be, I think tomorrow, there's going to be an attempt to bring a general election about. I think as things stand, Doris wants 12th of December. Right. And the SNP and the Lib Dems are basically saying, no, we want it on the 9th. Which is a Monday, funnily enough. I don't know whether that's... there may be something to do with dates, because their fear, I think, is with the 12th is that there'd still be a possibility of him shoving something through that nobody wants or something. I don't know. Wait, maybe it's just a power struggle. They want to look like he's not in charge.
Are they not sitting for November?
Yeah, why? What do you mean?
Well, they could push something through in November then.
Yeah, it's unlikely though, because the Parliament will want to amend, won't they?
Yeah, but I mean, like, why? What's the difference of 3 days between the 9th and the 12th?
I don't know. I'm assuming there's some kind of relevance to it, other than just saying, well, you don't get to pick the date because we're going to call the shots. I'm assuming that's not the only reason. Okay. But I may be wrong about that.
I mean, it does just seem like everything that Boris... I mean, a lot of people are trying to make out, oh, he's doing a brilliant job, and you guys... Well, I say a lot of people, probably one person that had some likelihood of being a plant in the Question Time audience, and a bunch of bots in his own campaigns think that he's doing a great job. Although apparently, according to some of the polls, a lot of people still see him in a favourable light, and I don't know why. He's fucked up everything, and he's a liar and a cheat and just an arsehole of a human being.
Well, it's the expert divisiveness of the media that's split the country, really, and the world. There are enough people who believe the...
It's just that I still don't
not
understand.
necessarily believe, but kind of agree with the...
I mean, it's still majority unfavourable for, I think, most of the leaders.
Well, yeah, but the problem with that is you've got to kind of come up with somebody who has a majority of being favourable to counter that. I mean, if there's an equal amount of shit on all sides, then nobody wins or loses, do they?
The point I'm making
well, nobody
is
wins,
that
everybody
I don't
loses.
know why. I mean, Boris Johnson's sort of close. I don't know why this, whilst Jeremy Corbyn has problems, compared to Boris Johnson, I don't understand why people think like that.
Well, relating this to all sorts of things that are going on at the moment, including all the shit about like America pulling out of the Paris climate change agreement, and the stuff that's been going on in Chile as well with the anti-inequality demonstrations, that is now, they've apparently joined in with the French Yellow Vests to support them because it's a similar cause. There seems to be disquiet spreading. And I think when you see that yet again, California is pretty much all on fire.
I saw a thing where basically they're going to have to shut off, for safety reasons.
They've shut off power.
Energy grid.
Yeah. They've done that now.
Oh, right.
That was today, I think that was going to happen. Well, I assume they've done it. I haven't looked at the news, but it was today that they were going to have to do that because they've got what they said was they're going to have a historic
tens of millions of people though.
They're going to have a historic wind event apparently, which I said to Niana is, does that mean that somebody's going to fart so hard it's going to rip a hole in the space-time continuum if they're going to have a historic event, but I mean, I think thing is these things are becoming less and less historic because they're becoming the norm.
I do find, specifically with regards to the Chile protest, I have seen a few people in the way that they usually do, going, "Oh, why do you need to protest? There's no problems here," that sort of thing. Whilst originally the direct cause was a rise in train fares, there was a lot of
catalyst
there already.
It's a catalyst. Snowball. They are the most unequal country in, I think, is it South America or?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the same as is happening everywhere. It's the gap between the rich and the poor. I mean, we're going through this shit at the moment. I've spent hours over the last couple of days transcribing Mum's Star Stuff's latest PIP assessment interview because we're having to go to tribunal again. This is the third claim in 3 years, and it's the second time we're taking it to tribunal. The second time we didn't bother because we just thought, well, we're better off just starting again with another assessment. But this time we decided we were going to record it.
Yeah.
I mean, which you have to provide the equipment for yourself and then burn 2 identical CD copies in the room on the day.
But they do essentially, if you don't do something like that, completely lie about what you've said in their assessment of what someone can actually do.
So, I mean, while this is, I'm going through it and I'm seeing every single time that they've not just sometimes cherry-picked parts of sentences to stand them on their own and justify, at best, misleading quotes, but some of it's just blatant lies. Just doesn't, we're going to pick this particular bit of a conversation and completely ignore the rest of it.
Yeah,
and this is actually bollocks. And,
I can only walk 30 meters. They say, "Oh no, I think you can walk further because I know better." Even though the person that's actually writing that bit hasn't actually talked to that person. There is an assessor that does, but it seems like they've not even talked to each other.
It is. I mean, and the thing about it is that this is an entire system-wide problem, and it's getting worse and worse. It is the inequality thing, because it's like at the same time as I can understand partly the argument that some people might say, well, yeah, they can't give these benefits to everybody because who claims them, because
give them to the fucking corporations, can't they?
We've got all this austerity and the money's not there, and it's like, yeah, but and then you've got fucking heads of giant corporations earning millions in bonuses when their companies are going under.
Yeah,
and it's like, that isn't a fair society. So this is why people are starting to say, well, no, actually, we're not having it anymore.
Yeah, I do feel.
I understand if somebody is the head of a corporation that they do a lot of work, but not to the tune of putting everybody who is on the breadline at risk of not being able to pay for somewhere to live.
I do feel, though, that this is sort of a general atmosphere of anger, but quite often it can just be directed almost the opposite way sometimes, and sometimes it's just places that there's no real reason to be angry at, like places that don't really have a lot of power, like it's punching down, that sort of thing. There's this sort of perception, because I mean, a lot of media articles like to hyperbolize things and make a big issue out of things that aren't really an issue at all. And then people get this general perception of, oh, they must be so powerful and must be such a big problem, we have to solve that. But it's like, look at the actual problem. Look at the people actually paying these people to write these stories. They're probably the people,
and it's all interconnected. I mean, I don't actually agree with violent protest, but I can understand why it happens. And I've been going on about it in my different, my podcast as well, that, and I've been going on about Extinction Rebellion quite a lot. One of the things that I really like about their approach is the peaceful, non-violent aspect of it. It is disruptive, but
I don't understand how anyone can be angry at a non-violent protest unless they're actually attacking the issue at hand, which with climate change you're going up against.
But the thing is,
vast majority of the science.
What is the other option? You either do something, or you just sit back and take it. Because another thing that's been in the news this week is ExxonMobil. Have you read about this? A favourite American politician of yours was cross-examining them in court, or some scientists in court, not cross-examining, but questioned some of the scientists in court that used to work for ExxonMobil. Massive oil corporation. Back AOC? In the what?
Was this AOC?
Yes, yeah. Alexandria.
I feel like she's sort of gotten swept up in this sort of general hate bubble from a lot of conservatives, but she's actually a really talented. But it's all.
But the thing is, what people are getting angry about, and these are the people who actually are listening to the facts, the scientific data. And realising how the world has been manipulated for the last goodness knows how long. Back in the late 70s, ExxonMobil's scientists did research into the impact of fossil fuels on society, and
they pretty much got it spot on.
They did.
What's happening now.
It was exactly. I mean, they predicted exactly this, pretty much exactly the same average temperature rises, exactly the same carbon dioxide increases. And even more worryingly, they predicted that most of the planet will be uninhabitable by humans by the year 2050. And this is their own scientists that looked into it, and they buried it, basically. It's
it's like the tobacco companies.
It can't be buried now because it's so obvious what's happening. But people are still... The thing is, from sort of 1990 onwards, when it started to become apparent and more publicly... the public were more aware of it. It's now, since then, it's been a case of the fossil fuel companies basically funding campaigns to sow disbelief, if you like, to sow skepticism in the scientific data, to get enough people to question whether or not the scientists are actually telling the truth. And it's actually,
I imagine some of this includes funding bots that give the appearance that there's a lot more debate on this than there actually really should be.
Yeah, I mean,
there actually really is between real people.
Do you know what though? I wonder whether or not we may, because it's all gloom and doom to a certain extent, in that it can be very depressing and it can be very, people maybe like to bury their heads a little bit because it's easier to try to think that things are going to be okay, so you can just get on with everyday life. Otherwise, what's the point? You just give up if you think that we're all going to die. But I tend to try to be more optimistic about it, and that we as long as we get on it now, there is hope that we might be able to do something to change it. And I think the fact that now data is a more valuable commodity than oil potentially gives us an out.
The difference between data and the truth, though.
Yeah, but data, the reason that it's so easy to manipulate the world's media and the world's governments, or has been by the fossil fuel companies, is because that's where all the money is. That's where the lobbying power has been. But now, there is still a lot of money in that, but there is at least as much money in the world of data. So where is the influence coming from now? It's not all kind of monopolized by the fossil fuel companies anymore. There are potential other, but again, it's still the inequality of it all. It's still the
it will affect. Well, it already has affected the already worst off in the world, like poor farmers in Indonesia or the Philippines,
but those kind of things get buried. Those kind of stories get
indigenous tribes in the Amazon.
But we don't hear that much about them because
they don't really have a voice.
No. And the other thing that I noticed, I think it was The Guardian I was saying to Mum about earlier, was that they are starting to alter their representation of the climate crisis, in that they've realised that showing pictures of polar bears on melting ice floes it's too remote to connect with most people, because it's you don't see that. But if you show like California burning basically, and floods we regularly get in floods. I mean,
I suppose the area that we're in, we're sort of in the Highlands almost, where we are, so we'll probably be okay, at least to do with flooding.
I understand that these kind of things did happen in the past. You had hurricanes, you had floods, you had droughts and famines and stuff like that. But
I mean, actually, the biggest ones since records were kept have been in the last 10 years.
Yeah, and actually, the data suggests that we are getting gradually fewer hurricanes, but the ones that we do get are getting more and more powerful. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Because they're not moving. The energy's building up and they're just sitting until they just grow and grow. So anyway. So should we be scared? Should we be fearful?
Just quickly, on a similar note, you mentioned about AOC questioning the Exxon scientist. I've also noticed her takedown of Mark Zuckerberg in court.
All right, what was that about?
Yeah, well, I think it was in Congress. Basically, it was asking, I think, about concerns to do with election meddling, to do with like fake news on Facebook in the upcoming 2020 election.
Yeah.
And one of the candidates had actually tested this already slightly.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Warren ran intentionally misleading ads saying that Mark Zuckerberg had endorsed loads of Republican senators, but he had actually been having dinners with those sorts of people, as well as Republican media people. but that was technically a lie, but she was making the point that she could say that as fake news, and there was nothing that they would actually do there.
But I see, this is one of the things, because I did notice that I don't know if it's CIA, but certainly anti-terrorist, I think it was the CIA. Basically, whoever's responsible for fighting terror in the US have
security.
It could be, I don't know, but they've produced training videos and provided them to Facebook of sort of the kind of things that are happening in these sort of mass shootings and stuff like that. So that, because one of the things that happens is quite often nowadays terrorists will use like live streaming to actually broadcast their attacks. So they've provided video of the training footage for these scenarios to Facebook so that their algorithms are able to more accurately detect these live streams as soon as they go up and bring them down. And to me, that's where the key is. And I think I can completely understand about the issues that some of these massive social media companies have, is that there's just so much data being uploaded all the time that it's actually physically impossible to police it all. But from the point of view of an individual corporation, but as a collective global community, we can come together and we can do all this together.
Yeah,
it's not the sort of thing that a single company is, because I mean the amount of gigabytes and terabytes of data that's going up to YouTube all the time.
But they
can only catch so much.
There are general policies that they could make, like
let's
not have any Nazis on here because Nazis are generally a shitty thing to have on your platform.
Yeah.
But then people complain, oh, you're silencing my freedom of speech, even though Nazism inherently silences freedom of speech.
Yeah, so I suppose there are grey areas.
Well, I'm talking about literal, undisputable Nazis here. Self-proclaimed people.
Yeah.
But they don't really ban people on that basis.
Yeah, and I suppose to a certain extent, you've got to... I totally agree that kind of material needs to be not disseminated, but it's the same degree, is it just going to go underground if...
Yeah, but it's going to go underground in a place where there aren't billions of users.
Yeah, I suppose.
Which is like damage control, basically.
Yeah.
Also part of that, I think it would just be like a questioning. She did ask about the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And at what point did various people within Facebook actually know what was going on there?
I still haven't watched that program on Netflix about that.
Prior to the initial report by The Guardian on the whole.
I can't remember what it was called. There was a big documentary on that on Netflix. I can't remember what it was called.
The Big Short, possibly? That might have been to do with the Brexit vote more rather than the 2016 campaign.
Well, yeah, the two were quite closely kind of interwoven, weren't they? And it all gets quite complicated when you start thinking about all this shit that's happened with Syria recently as well.
Yeah. But basically, it wasn't a very convincing answer.
I mean, the Russian involvement is what I'm talking about.
Yeah. He said that he didn't know until around 2018 about the specifics of this thing, but he also said that somebody might have known within the company about it and was carrying out internal investigations.
But
the initial report was in 2015, I think.
See, the thing is, I mean, relating this to the subject of the podcast, I kind of get the what people are saying when they sort of complain about people kind of sowing Project Fear and all this, and it's like, yeah, but some things it's appropriate to be fearful of.
Yeah.
It's not a criticism to say that people are trying to emotively scare people, or people are likely to become anxious about some of these issues that are going on. I mean, since when do we think it's okay? Well, we don't think it's okay, but I mean, we got these people that have come across in a refrigerated lorry from China. It's like, what kind of society are they fleeing from that they think coming here, risking their lives to come here, is
well a lot less free society.
Yeah.
However bad things get in the UK, we must also remember that most places in the world are a lot worse to live in.
But how do we change that? We don't stand much of a chance of changing that if we go isolating ourselves and cutting ourselves off from other countries.
Yeah, well,
the only way to kind of spread your own kind of freedom, if you like, is to be connected with those countries, not to cut yourself off from them.
Yeah, well, I don't think most of the people that are campaigning for Brexit, maybe some of the people that voted for Brexit are less like this, but most of the people that actually campaigned for it, I don't think are particularly concerned about the state of the world or even the state of Britain. They're more concerned about the state of a few specific groups.
Well, so, I mean, some people do have an affinity with that idea of not necessarily ruling by fear, but kind of having a powerful position on a world stage, which obviously we're giving away some of the power that we've got. But why do you need to be powerful? What is the kind of why is this obsession with having power over other people and other countries? I know you've got to have a voice.
Gives them all a hard on.
But I don't know.
There's a lot
Anyway.
of people that want fame and power, and it's kind of hard to understand from some perspective what actual real change that makes.
So in a world that's totally fucked, how do you? How is the definition of fear affected? And when you relate it to stuff like Halloween and horror films, and the general kind of, because some people seek out fear for adrenaline's sake.
Yeah,
I mean, to me, the absolute sort of purest definition of fear is about apprehension about the unknown.
Yeah, I guess. There are some people that do that to an extreme level where they are actually putting themselves in harm's way, like the war zone tourists, that sort of thing. And well, some of them might be doing that for like a rough experience or something, rather than the actual fear part. But
it would be so easy to end up on the wrong side, So.
And some people jump out of planes without parachutes because it gives them a rush.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I guess most people that have any sort of enjoyment from subjecting themselves to some sort of fear, it's sort of derived from that controlled environment.
Well, and adrenaline is one of the strongest sort of
it
drugs,
gives you that
it?
adrenaline high, but
so in that sense, do you think the more you...
It doesn't actually drain you.
The more you kind of court that feeling that you get from an adrenaline rush, do you think it has a kind of an escalating lure like you get with certain addictive drugs, I suppose?
I guess at some point if you start chasing that, but
what's the most scared you've ever been?
Halloween Horror Nights.
Really?
Well, in a sort of, in some ways, in a pure terror sort of way, but there's been a sort of times in my life, I won't go into specifics because some of it's quite private, where I've been a lot more scared in a serious way, where I'm actually scared for my future and what's going to happen, in a more real sense, actual.
I suppose what I'm thinking about is
life.
Immediate kind of physical fear rather than sort of general overall fear for the future, kind of.
Well, that has sometimes manifested in one time or another a panic attack for me. But
You don't think being 200 feet up on a sky swing, looking at the floor?
and that was scary, but I wasn't literally like shaking and crying.
Right. Yeah.
But going through that one house in Halloween Horror Nights was the most scary thing that I've ever been through. But that I will never forgive.
Well, it's definitely but it's definitely right for some people and not for others. But you,
Well, you did buy Hamilton tickets, so you are forgiven.
you have a sensory input levels different to possibly most people.
Yeah.
In that, all that kind of bright lights and loud noises, which
Particularly the loud noises, like
it's full on for you. So
if we were going, especially when I was younger, going to, like balloons, fucking terrifying. Going to shows where there's like a gunpowder shot, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you're better with that now.
Fireworks are terrifying.
But I would say, I mean, in defence of actually taking you along to that, and I know I've heard other people kind of criticising taking small children to that sort of thing because it is terrifying, or people that shouldn't be in those situations. And I know you do have autism, but part of our way of treating that and helping you come to terms with it and finding out what works and what doesn't has been for us kind of not pushing the boundaries, but testing your limits. Do you know what I mean? To kind of find out what you are comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. And in some ways it has, we didn't push you once you'd been through that first house and it was clear, yeah, this is not going to work. We didn't kind of force you to do any more. We gave you an out, as it were, as much as we could. But yeah, I suppose, I mean, you certainly wouldn't be wanting to take young kids through that sort of thing.
No.
But I mean, some people, even as adults, are not into being scared for entertainment.
I mean, it's sort of weird though, because like, I love roller coasters.
Yeah.
I mean, no, roller coasters seem like a sort of a bit of a Marmite thing, where most of the people I've met either really like the big ones or can't stand them whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the discomfort of the aggressive ones where you get thrown about a lot. I'm not too fond of. But in terms of the actual fear aspect, I am not great with heights, but I love high roller coasters, and I wonder whether or not some of that is to do with the fact that I actually feel relatively safe. I can experience the sensation of that fear of the height. But
how
being in a harness and not being, I think for me, if I'm up high, like when we went up, is it Howard's Seat? Is that the name of the tower in York?
Yeah, something like that.
When we went up there, I mean, it's quite a wide thing that you walk around and there are railings and stuff, but I felt really uncomfortable up there. And if I'm on my own feet, if I'm walking somewhere up high, that's when I feel really uncomfortable because it's more within my control and I can overbalance, and it's
sort of like
my discomfort could cause a problem,
It's sort of like that feeling of, if I do trip on my feet up here, I could actually die.
Yeah. Whereas nothing I actually do when I'm in a roller coaster is going to cause me to die, unless I actually like take my. Well, you can't really take your harness off, but do you know what I mean? It's you can't be responsible for your own. I don't know.
Unless you're being very stupid, but it's not sort of like an accident could happen there.
Do you know? I invented a ride system in my head once. A kind of roller coaster system. I think I actually got in touch with. I think I emailed. What was his name? Can't remember. The guy that does a lot of the design for the Alton Towers roller coasters. Okay. Because I came up with an idea for a system which was the Fear ride system, which is fully. What was it? It was fully enhanced automated ride system, FEAR system.
What does that mean?
And it could actually be and if anyone steals this from me now, this podcast is going to be proof that this was my idea. It's like posting your own music to yourself, so you got copyright on the stamp. You know, this is basically, you know, in some like arcades, you get like these little sort of pods that are like not virtual. They're like ride simulators where you actually get into like a little kind of what would you call it? It's a bit like a sort of a shuttle, a Star Trek shuttle kind of thing. There's basically, you got two seats and a screen inside it, and you pull the hatch down, and you're in a fully enclosed thing with a screen. My idea was to put something like that, but it could be adapted in all sorts of ways. Something like that on tracks. So you've actually got, like, instead of a roller coaster car, you're in one of those enclosed boxes, if you like, and you can have anything inside it. You can have smells, you can have the screen on the inside of it, and it's a bit like, I suppose it's the same concept as that virtual reality thing that didn't work with Air that turned into Galactica.
Did that not work?
Well, it did, but they don't use it anymore because I don't know how well it kind of. But the point is, rather than having a headset on, you actually just get into an enclosed car, and the way that it would synchronize whatever you're. Now, bear with me on this. This is the technical part. Do you know about MIDI sequencing?
Yeah,
music and digital interface. Basically, you can program anything from lights to pyrotechnic effects to music to anything that can be triggered electronically. You can program into what's called a sequencer using MIDI information. You could use that by having sensors on the track of any ride to trigger synchronization points within a special effects sequence. So, like on a windy day, the roller coaster might be going slightly slower, but as it passes the sensor points on the track, it will automatically synchronize the film that you're watching or any sound that you're hearing at the same time. So the idea would be, say, for instance, you go up to the top of the big one in Blackpool and you're 200 and something feet up. What you could do, you could have that synchronized with a video screen where you're actually feeling the sensation of going down a 200-foot drop, which is bad enough on its own. But imagine at the same time as dropping those 200 feet, you actually see a screen where you're dropping 1,000 feet at the same time.
Yeah.
So you're feeling the physical sensation of a massive drop, but it's really accentuated. Or you could have like a corkscrew turn where you're going away to the right and what you're actually seeing is going to the left at the same time.
You do like a Matrix ride where you do the jump and actually fall into the floor.
Yeah. But you could add sound, you could add like sort of 4DX type effects and stuff, smells and what have you, wind.
It's kind of hard to tell what's going on inside these sorts of things whilst you're actually inside them. It does sound sort of a smaller scale and more extreme, especially like big drops and stuff, to things like the Simpsons ride at Universal.
Yeah, but that's not on tracks though.
Yeah. But it does feel like it's sort of partially on track. It's not just like that sort of.
I think you'd be fully enclosed. The idea of this is that you can have a train, like a roller coaster train, where instead of just getting into a seat and strapping in, you get into a car and they pull the doors down, and so it's literally like a train, But I think that the part of it because there's obviously similar aspects to all sorts of rides that already exist, but the part of it that I would lay claim to would be the idea of synchronizing a MIDI controlled effects track to sensors on the track itself. Because I suppose you could adapt that to any kind of ride, whether it's a roller coaster track or anything else. You could have a sensor.
It reminds me of roller coaster Tycoon 3. You can set a specific bit of track to activate. So it's quite limited in what the special effects you can do. It's like a sharp attack or an explosion or something. I just had this real kind of imagine, like, you've been on Rock and Roller Coaster, haven't you? Yes.
You know the launch at the beginning of that, and there's a similar kind of launch at the beginning of the Incredible Hulk and Rita as well. There's that mag launch coasters.
Yeah.
where you're being thrust forward. Imagine at that point the screen's zooming out backwards.
That's the Aerosmith one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was getting it confused with the Rip Ride.
Imagine you're being launched forwards, but at the same time, the screen that you're looking at is zooming out away from you, and it's almost like you're going into a black hole, but it feels like you're shooting forwards, but it's getting further away at the same time.
It sounds like Hitchcock film.
And yeah, an intense version of Vertigo, that kind of Vertigo film shot.
Oh, that would be horrible.
Or amazing.
You could have a space
But
odyssey where
you could
just go on a weird trip.
But that opens up so many options for proper fear design, do you know what I mean? Like, where you could really play with the senses.
That's what it looks like when I walk up the stairs.
Yeah.
Have you been
Try telling
to
DWP
Alton Towers
that.
since they put in that Wicker Man thing?
No. Last time I went to Alton Towers was with you.
Oh, yeah. Is that the one that Darren Brown did, or is that something else?
No, that's at Thorpe Park. That's some kind of railway carriage thing.
That
might be
sounds in some ways similar to what you might be describing.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That is something to do with fear, though. Yeah, but you could have all sorts of. You could make it hyper realistic in terms of you witness a virtual coaster exactly the same but much, much bigger, or you could have it completely abstract where you're being launched through fractal tunnels and stuff like that.
I guess
that would be quite.
It would be cool for a mathematician.
Yeah, but do you know what I mean? There's so many possibilities, and I think that the idea behind it would be I would patent that as a system, the fear system,
right?
Fully enhanced automated ride.
Are you proud of yourselves?
Yeah, well, not really, no, because it was like probably about 17, 18 years ago I came up with this idea, and I haven't made any money out of it. So, but then that's because I'm not a corporate cunt. Oh, I used the C word.
I use it all the time on this.
Yeah, I just feel a bit naughty because I'm 48 and responsible.
Are you really? Anyway, I guess touching upon...
Please don't touch it.
Darren Brown. With
You're touching upon Darren Brown. I'm sure he would enjoy that.
The subject of Darren Brown.
Mm.
With that sort... I guess it's sort of because you don't understand it. That's the unknown thing that causes a sort of fear there.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going with this.
Paralysis. Did you remember that one of my favourite episodes of his specials when he did the thing with the guy that had the fear of flying?
I've probably watched it on YouTube at some point.
It was something else. Like this guy was really scared of flying, and he basically managed to get him to the point where he believed that he was taking over the controls of an aeroplane and saving an entire passenger flight because the pilots had conked out or something, had a heart attack or something. So, and he was scared of flying, but he got him to the point where he overcame that enough to actually land the plane. It was all done in a simulator, but he thought he was in, because he'd been hypnotized. He thought he was in a real.
He did gradually build up that sort of resilience to fear, where during his sleep he got him to walk to some railway tracks and stand on the line for as long as possible and then get pulled off.
Oh, was that the same episode, was it?
I think so.
Yeah, I can't remember. But...
And then, not to spoil too much, there are a lot of things.
We're pretty much just giving away the whole plot. But
I did quite enjoy the push.
Yeah, that was that was an interesting one.
It basically...
It's scary
got someone to... I think he plays a lot around with authority, this idea of authority.
Well, I was just thinking that, because how would it feel to know that you have the power to affect people like that? You can.
No one listens to me, so I don't know.
But, that must be quite a scary realization to I mean, he obviously has to be very careful because he could seriously fuck you up.
Well, I bet they have like psychologists that go to check on them afterwards, and they do have to sign a contract saying that they're okay with all of this. So it's not
But
just like getting a random person.
He's had people that he's hypnotized into thinking he's had people convinced that they've actually committed murder. He's had people convinced to try to assassinate a celebrity, and just normal everyday people. He's got them to that state of mind where they will do that.
Well, it's sort of, I guess, removing this illusion that we're separate from those people, that those people that actually do that stuff weren't once everyday normal people.
And that's the scary thing. That's the real fear for me, is that if you can do that with an individual, you can do that with a society.
Well, I don't know how many. I would imagine there are some people, but I feel like a lot of it's sort of subconscious, sort of like the people that wrote the Bible, for example, probably weren't doing it to get really rich, because I don't imagine they did when they were writing it. However, subsequently, various churches have extorted people out of their money using that. But whether they're doing that knowingly or they just believe in that and believe that it's their God-given right to take this money.
Well, I would imagine it's more valuable to have that measure of control over a population. I mean, in terms of a wider profitability, it's not so much, I suppose, that the church would want to make that money for themselves, but it benefits people who do make a lot of money from the control of the masses, to retain that control, and therefore
gets to that sort of point where it does feel, especially with the likes of Steve Bannon and Dominic Cummings coming into our politics as advisors, sort of Machiavellian type statecraft, where devising loads of schemes to go around various systems, basically justifying it by the fact that they can legally do it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is that sort of death by a thousand cuts thing, the gradual boiling frog thing, isn't it? That you change that Overton window, that kind of gradual process. And I have to bring something up, actually, that I mentioned to Star Stuff, since she is in the room, the other day, that she didn't agree with me on at the time, but I've since seen it reported on, with fears of the same kind that I had, about Boris Johnson talking about if the opposition parties don't agree with him having this general election, that they will move to daily campaigning to push an agenda which basically promotes the removal of the subjection of the people to a useless parliament. Now, when I mentioned that to Star Stuff, she took that as meaning this parliament. But my first reaction to it, perhaps I'm just a little bit more cynical, my first reaction to it was the idea of getting rid of a particular system of parliament.
Yeah, I mean,
and there were that was an independent thought that I came to, and there were
loads
reports.
of different power play going on here, where I think some people involved in advising Boris Johnson want to devise a system where they can basically do whatever they want for as long as they want. But I think some people are just going along with, we need to do this thing. We'll go around it slightly with this method that someone else has come up with, but don't really see it in a wider context of why that's setting a dangerous precedent for the future.
And I know to some people it seems like you're trying to find fault and trouble, but the use of words like subjection is...
I think
it's kind of a subliminal kind of
I mean, we do
introduction to a concept. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we do forget how recent some of this history is, where we didn't really consider everyone's. I mean, we don't necessarily consider everyone's voice now, but at least the majority of people have the vote.
Oh, Jesus.
Is there a spider?
Yeah, it's huge.
Oh, live on the Fear podcast. There's a huge spider. I should bring it to the camera.
I'm blaming you lot for
Where
it.
is it?
Down there on the floor
I need a
somewhere.
glass, I'm going to bring
Got
it.
a glass.
Can you go have
Yeah, but
it?
it's got beer in it.
Okay, get drunk.
Is it still there?
Didn't
I
realize.
don't know. I just saw it running along there somewhere, so it's probably either gone under my sofa or on the other sofa. And it's huge. You will not miss it.
Shit, Theo, it's on your foot.
Fuck you. I believed you for a second.
Why did you just slap the sofa?
Because I'm trying to make it not be here.
Oh my god, it's an 8-legged furry dog. I bet the spider's scared.
Well, yeah, but I don't care because it's a freaky spindly bastard.
Oh,
Don't let it escape.
I won't let it escape.
Don't you fucking dare.
I won't.
No.
I could actually make podcast history.
Fuck you, no.
Throw it in your face.
Don't you fucking dare. I will actually kill you.
It's fear.
No. Oh, that's horrible.
I have no idea how much of that you can see, but I'm going to call it Fred.
Oh, no.
I'm about to dump it on Theo's head. See, this is why you shouldn't boop me so much.
Online murder.
It's torture. Because you actually will accidentally.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, and all others in between and outside of those definitions, was the equivalent of Firebolt dangling me off the edge of a 1,000-foot building live on the podcast.
I think that would have to be the Burj Khalifa, which is quite sharp. There are actually quite a few buildings you could drop me off. I could dangle you over that are 1,000 feet. Exciting. I could dangle them off of Trump Hotel in Chicago. Actually, all of the buildings listed on Wikipedia that are tallest are taller than 1,000 feet, so I could dangle you off quite a few buildings.
It's a weird thing, though. I mean, even though I found it really, really uncomfortable, that whole...
I found that really fucking uncomfortable.
But that whole, you know, what do they call it? They call it the Walk of Faith. The glass thing that you walk on it, not glass. I don't know if it is glass. It might be glass. At the top of the Blackpool Tower. I mean, they have similar things.
Perspex or something.
They have similar things at different. There's a thing at the top of the. Is it the CN Tower? There's a walk that you can do where you attach yourself to the top of the. Yeah, you basically. But that's a similar thing to what was that ride that we went on? Is it Falcon's Fury? The one where it's like a drop ride, but it you lean over forwards before you drop, so you're kind of facing downwards.
I think it was called Apocalypse or something. In
No, there is.
Drayton Manor.
Yeah, there is that one, but there was one in Florida as well, I think.
Oh,
That might
you
be
mean the
Falcon's
one
Fury.
at Busch Gardens?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember the names of the rides there. What are you afraid of other than heights?
Well, it depends what you mean by afraid of, because there's different forms of fear, isn't there? I mean, heights is one that immediately makes me feel, I suppose, the most intense sort of physical fear. In general, I suppose I'm afraid of dying. Purely from the point of view of, I'm not afraid of death because that. I don't know. That's one of those things,
You're
isn't
sort
it?
of afraid of
I'm not afraid of
not existing anymore.
Well, I'm not afraid of it. I think I'm probably. Do you know what I think? A part of it is with dying. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of not knowing that I'm dying, because to me, we all know we're going to die unless some miraculous thing happens with some kind of immortality
you say we
technology.
all know, but the majority of the world, I think, believes in the afterlife. So
That's true. But
I'm scared of dying before the Game of Thrones books are finished. It's quite a possibility.
I'm scared of George R.R. Martin dying before they're finished.
But to me, it's a bit like you haven't seen Star Trek Generations yet, have you?
No.
We will get onto that. We will have to carry on with our Star Trek endeavour. But it's not too much of a spoiler for people to know that that's the one where Kirk dies.
Oh, with it.
Oh shit! Sorry, but it's that idea of that this is introduced. I think I don't know if it's an episode of Next Generation you've seen yet, but there's one where they're all going to die, and I think Beverly Crusher is given the opportunity to put her son to sleep for it, and she says, "No, I want him to see it coming. I want him to face it with his eyes open." But it's that thought of, because it's the last great adventure. Do you know what I mean? It's the last thing you're ever going to experience. And what's his name? Darren Brown, who you've mentioned before, has done some work on this. And I'm sure I saw a documentary where he was in contact with somebody who was dying of a terminal illness. And he said that it was actually fascinating to watch that actually she became a lot more alive and focused and had purpose because she knew that she had, however long it was, 6 months or a year to live, and that was going to be it. In that sense, it took away all the nonsense. It was like the things that didn't matter, that most of us are obsessed by from day to day,
I suppose
became extraneous,
that's sort of not
We'll
that
put
you
in
should
context.
actively expose yourself to a situation where you might die, but that's sort of the actual usefulness in an evolutionary sense of fear actually motivates you to do things.
Well, again, it's a Star Trek thing that is at Kirk. It's like, I need my pain. There is that fear. There is that kind of, I think, and there is often mentioned, live every day like it's your last. Not in ways that, you literally think you're going to die. But, I think it would be a healthy habit to cultivate, to wake up every morning and think, what would I do with today if I knew it was my last? And I get this from listening to Dream Theater, First Track on Images and Words, Pull Me Under. There's a line in that, and when I saw them perform it live, I saw them 25 years earlier doing it on tour, and then I didn't see them live, but then I saw them again last year, I think it was, on the 25th anniversary tour of that album. And one of the lines in it is something about every day being brings me one. Every step is one less to my last, or something, and every day brings me closer to my last, or something like that. I can't remember, but that kind of, and I saw that last year. I was thinking, shit, that this concert's brought me 25 years closer to my death since the last time I saw them perform it. And it's like
day, future and past brings me one more to my last.
Yeah, it's like, it might seem morbid, and in some ways it might seem like depressing and hopeless, but at the same time, while you've still got time, there's always hope. Not hope that you're gonna bypass it or sidestep it or not have to go through it, not have to die, but hope that you might actually get something more from life than you already have.
Yeah.
That you can do more, that you can be more, or not achieve, because success is kind of subjective.
I guess it's easy to sort of get stuck in the grind.
Definitely.
Where, I mean, there is the grind, and then...
That's another excellent album, Skid Row, Slave to the Grind.
I guess I'm opening up a bit here. Sort of almost survival system. I mean, I guess grinding in a financial sense is a survival system, but more like a social survival system where you just get through this day because it means that you'll get to the next one.
Yeah. It's weird because I mean that kind of relates to something that I've been finding more and more, and it's maybe as I get older that I'm beginning to worry that every day I'm kind of excited about the fact that I'm going to get to go to bed again. Because I love going to bed. It's just like relaxing and falling asleep. Sort of just like kind
perfect of moment where you're
drifting off.
Just like you pull the covers over and it just get warming up, and it's just like
yeah,
it's just like it's just warmth, and it's just like
That's probably the furthest removed from fear that you can get, even though you're about to lose consciousness for several hours, hopefully.
Well, a few hours for me usually, but
you should try sleeping with a toddler in the room.
Yeah.
I don't even try sleeping with my wife in the room anymore.
Well, no, because you're right.
Well, I think it is essentially because you are a middle-aged equivalent of a toddler.
How very dare you?
Mentally.
How very dare you?
Yeah, it's a good way to live, excited about things and a bit mad, but...
I'm glad that I'm actually fairly proud that that comes across.
I mean, sometimes you do get to be a bit of a grumpy prick, but...
Yeah, but usually that's because you deserve it.
I mean, when it's...
How would you survive every day having somebody coming up to you and going like, boop, on your nose, like dozens of times a day? Every time you see them walk into a room, you know that you're going to get... And you actually nearly scratched the end of my nose off earlier on, you vicious...
No, I'm going to cut it off. I almost gave you a cut on your nose. That would be a slight inconvenience.
First world problems.
I suppose that's sort of the point.
What, torturing your dad?
No. This sort of existential fear, it's sort of a luxury.
Well, yeah, but the problem is, I mean, the existential fear that we've got in terms of the climate crisis, we're going to be the last ones, not necessarily the very last ones, but we're going to be pretty long-lived in terms of, there's 8 billion people or however many there are. We're going to be among the last billion that are here.
On Earth. But I don't,
yeah.
No, it feels...
If we're all going to die out, we're going to be among the last of them because we're in the privileged higher section of...
I would be...
You don't feel like you are, though. When you live here, when you live in the Western world, you don't feel like you're in the privileged portion of the global
I would
community.
Be interested to get your perspective on this, because to you, 2050 is 30... Well, for everyone, it's 31 years away. But to you, you'll be...
69 that year.
No, you'll be 79.
Yeah.
So that would be, according to the average life expectancy, a fairly full life lived. I mean, it's not necessarily the maximum that you could live.
For some reason, it's probably just a neat thing. But I don't know whether or not this is going to happen. But I would like to live to 100 because it's a nice round number.
Yeah, but I mean, it sort of if a mass extinction event happened in 2050 exactly, I mean, it's probably more likely to be around about there where the Earth becomes uninhabitable, sort of like maybe within a 10-year window.
Yeah. Is it likely to be an event as such?
But it depends also what you mean by uninhabitable, because if it means that it's literally impossible to live there without dying, or if it's impossible to live there without adequate amenities, but theoretically people could still survive.
Well, the thing is, it'll be a gradual process because as desertification and
survive that like on the surface rather than just underground in a bunker hoarding all the food.
As desertification and habitability of the planet becomes more and more scarce, there'll be increased migration, which we're already seeing, obviously, and that's causing pressure on different nations, societies, cultures, which becomes a breeding ground for fascism, because you then start getting civil unrest, which governments have a choice. They basically either listen to the civilians that are causing the unrest and do the thing that needs to be done to try to put things right, or you crack down.
That is a really scary thing. A lot of people don't like to think about it, but the current estimates are that it's by 2050 that it's 1 in 20 chance of complete human extinction.
The IPCC report, which is conservative because it's been through, and it's also behind as well because it's based on data that's been scientifically peer reviewed and therefore by definition is already 2 or 3 years old because it's had to go through that whole verification process. The report that came out last year,
whilst I do appreciate that it's rigorous, there is a sort of problem with problems that require
we basically have
quite imminent solutions.
We had 12 years, it's now 11, to bring our global carbon emissions down to net zero to stand a 50% chance of averting climate catastrophe.
Yeah.
50% chance. And so basically we're talking by 2030. And the Paris Climate Change Agreement is 2050. America's just pulled out of it. We, although we're still in it, aren't meeting our targets at the moment. We're still increasing. So
terrifying.
I mean, we're seeing the mild implications at the moment. You know, the hurricanes, the floods, the droughts, the famine. There've been famines, obviously. Over the decades, there's been famines always, but the fact that it's becoming more frequent and more intense in so many different areas, the political problems, the migratory problems.
But it's sort of terrifying that I'm likely to be among the last before a civilizational collapse. I mean, they have happened in history before, and generally things go back to what they were before civilization existed. So a massive population drop, but there's still humans.
But the worry with this one is that it's not something that's happened while humans have been on the planet. This particular escalation in the average temperatures hasn't happened this quickly, and the increase in carbon dioxide content hasn't happened this quickly since, I think, about 3 or 4 mass extinctions ago. Not meaning to sow fear into the hearts of the nation or anything, but I think we only have about 8 regular listeners anyway, so they'll all be cowering in fear in their nuclear bunkers. You never know, that could happen. We could have a nuclear war, that'd solve things, wouldn't it?
The spider would survive, though.
Yeah. Do you think they'd be scared of humans then?
I don't think they are scared of humans. I think that's a lie. They're evil. I think they're actually creating the climate problem. I think they're the problem.
The spider
could get rid of us.
Underground generating.
Yeah.
It's a web of deceit.
Mm-hmm. It certainly is.
Maybe Boris Johnson's just a giant spider.
It doesn't put it past him. And Trump. He looks like a spidery kind of guy. Yeah.
Spidicus orangicus.
Yeah.
This is not like Australia, though. At least the deadly spiders here don't jump. We do need spiders, though.
Yeah, but they don't need to be in my house.
Well, do they not kind of trap and eat other things like flies and stuff which carry diseases? So they're Actually, kind of.
I don't mind flies. They're fine.
You don't mind flies? What? Even though they eat shit and then walk on your sandwiches?
Well, so do toddlers.
No, toddlers try to feed you their shit.
Yeah. Or they shit in the bath when you're in the bath with them.
Yeah, Star Stuff has woken up to being fed pellets of poo from a nappy. I'm not going to say any more than that. That's when you know fear.
Yeah.
When you're scared to go to sleep in case you wake up being fed shit. Sounds a bit like modern day society, though.
That's when you're scared to wake up because you're going to be fed shit.
First thing you do in the morning. If the first thing you do in the morning is look at your news feed on your phone, then you're pretty much doing that.
I think it's the sort of thing that a lot of people don't. I mean, I don't even really take it into my everyday life. I mean, I sort of.
What, shit?
No, the sort of existential fear, because you just have to get on with stuff sometimes.
You do.
But it's that sort of. I suppose a lot of people, like my age, expect their life to be represented by something in like TV or movies with like technological advances, maybe, but similar.
Do you know? Sorry,
but it's a weird thing that it's entirely possible if things don't change quickly. But
there is hope.
That entire way of life is going to be gone.
But that's the point. You want that entire way of life to be gone, because that entire way of life is what's causing the problems at the moment. The capitalist kind of...
In some ways, but...
you still want it to be survivable.
When you're talking about a massive civilizational collapse, that means that probably most modern medicines are going to go with it, and a lot of diseases are going to come back that
but we do need
been dealt with.
We do... Well, I suppose that's why there needs to be a structural change, preferably without the collapse. There's got to be a revolution, but without...
Here's the thing: if we don't structurally change, then the collapse is going to change, and that's going to be a forceful, very quick. I mean, it's this sort of, I guess, a good analogy for it is in a car crash. The thing that actually causes you to die is that you're decelerating very quickly. It's that your acceleration's changing very quickly, rather than. It's more that you're decelerating very quickly rather than acceleration. But
your organs get crushed against your rib cage.
Yeah, it's
inertia.
It's not just that you're hitting something; it's more that you're just slowing down very fast.
Yeah,
but it's sort of that if that happens in a very short time span and a catastrophe happens, then it's not this more sort of choice-led structural change. I mean,
I feel
the frustration is that there are solutions there that we're just not doing.
I feel like
it's easier not to.
I feel like the change is going to be less painful for more progressive countries. For instance, I think it's Norway that are doing really well at the moment with the electric car situation. We in this country need to do it a lot quicker. We need the infrastructure. I want a Tesla, by the way.
Expensive.
I know, but that's the point, isn't it? I mean, but over the next year or two, I think most manufacturers are coming out with cheaper models of stuff, but we don't have the infrastructure. There's that. People aren't buying them because they're worried that they're not going to get, or if they do get to where they need to go, there's going to be a queue for a charging station that somebody's going to be parked in all day because they're at work or whatever. There's got to be a lot more infrastructure. And that's what the government can do something about. Need to be pushed to do something about.
I mean, there is another point there about it being too expensive. That, I mean, at least where we live and where a large portion of the world lives, our entire society is based on money.
Yeah.
I mean, basically the whole world is based on money right now.
But how do you define too expensive? You know,
it's
what,
all like relative to
you've-
inflation and stuff. You don't have to ask.
but you've got
economists, but
you've got to compare it to what the alternatives are and how expensive they will be.
yeah, but it's sort of like you can't tell that to the person at the car dealership, can you? Though you can't say, maybe I'll be in loads of debt, and maybe I don't actually have any money for this, but you know what? It'll work out better for you.
But this is one of the things that, I mean, okay, it's a dramatic change, a shift in the attitude of society as a whole that needs to happen. But it can happen once it starts to pick up pace. I think it can happen quite quickly, and I think it's based on awareness and acceptance of reality. Because one thing I've noticed since over the last month or two, I've become a hell of a lot more aware of obviously the environmental situation, but also the politics surrounding it and the socio-economic dynamics that are kind of driving it all at the moment. And as a result of that, I don't know, I mean, it can't be that things are being... I think that's always been there. That awareness, that attitude of... I'm noticing in films and TV and music and all forms of art, I'm noticing things about the message and the metaphors now that I wasn't noticing before around that idea of people coming together as a society to get us out of a mess that's being imposed on us from on high. And I think that message has always been there, because some of the stuff that I'm noticing it in has, you know, is from films and TV things that have been around for a good 2 or 3 decades. And then you begin to realise, well, actually, this message, this political message, has been present throughout probably all art since we started making it. It's a fight back. It's a mental, like I say, it's an awareness, but society, I think, needs to wake up to it. And I think once that happens, I think it will just happen. You know, the hope that we need, the fear that we need to overcome, society will just do it naturally, because it will be the right way to go. It will be the survival instinct. I mean, like now, you look at the amount I know it's not anywhere near as efficient as it needs to be in terms of recycling. But you look at the way people treat their rubbish nowadays. You know, even a couple of decades ago, nobody could have been asked to do anything except just chuck everything out in the bin. But we've got so much shit now, and we know...
Interesting thing. I mean, it does seem...
It becomes automatic.
Honestly, like, I mean, there is a way to go, because it's a big problem. That the personal change is largely that. A lot of people do want to change to make the world better. However, that's never going to solve it.
Well, I think that's the only thing that can solve it, as long as it happens in a global way. Because the problem is, at the moment, the norm, the habit, the attitude of everyone is consumerism. It's you know, when you're out, you feel, even if you're not hungry, you feel like going out for a slap up meal and getting yourself stuffed silly, or you just want stuff all the time.
Yeah,
you feel like buying something is going to make you feel better, but it doesn't.
I mean, I would say generation, but it's sort of a group of generations that has been brought up on this idea of, I can have that, I want it, I'm going to get that.
But
I'm going to work to get that, I'm going to get that, it's mine now, haha.
But speaking of that, from my perspective, obviously I don't go back as far as baby boomer time, but I was born in the early 70s.
Yeah.
And it's been a gradual transition from I remember when I was, say, 10 or 11, I didn't feel hard done by. But to me at that time, I specifically remember every Friday evening having a Crunchie and a glass of lemonade with my mum while we watched Dynasty on the TV. And that was a treat. That was my chocolate bar for the week. That was, a little bit of fizzy drink and a chocolate bar. Or I had my 30p spending money that I spent on a comic once a week. And I know I was a kid, but that nowadays it's not something that's happened suddenly. It's gradually the acquisition of more disposable income has happened because of the capitalist consumerist model, that gradually people have got more and more used to it. See, back then, because that was a treat, suddenly if I'm old enough to have enough money to have that treat every day, I feel more special now because I feel as though I've improved on the previous generation. I have more capacity to consume than we had when I was a kid. So it feels, this society makes me feel then like I am worth more because I have more expendable income than they had when I was a kid. But it's not right. But that's the way our consumerist society makes you feel. If you have the ability to go to Florida every year, you're worth more than you were 10 years ago when you had to save up for 10 years to do it and still be in debt. Do you know what I mean? It makes you feel as though you are worth more to society. And in a capitalist society, you are, but only to the point where it begins to destroy itself.
Yeah, you're only worth more to the people that you're actually paying, which aren't necessarily always people that make the world a better place.
And what really fucks me off is that in this society, which is basically bought by the fossil fuel companies, we are essentially paying them to kill us.
Mm.
Is that something you should be scared of? Is that what fear's about?
Suicide booth.
We've all seen, over the years, we've seen genocide on the news and felt powerless to do anything about it because, the UN doesn't have any teeth and we can't really go in. And, we've seen genocide happen, but this is global ecocide and it's happening to everyone. It's far worse. We can do something about it. The fear is that you can't. And I think that is the power, is the fear, isn't it? That if you feel like you can't do anything about it, you don't.
Yeah. Examining fear is sort of this... Well, there's the unknown thing, but there's sort of the unchangeable thing. Like, although you can know about an asteroid that might hit the Earth because we can measure it, there's still nothing that any human or any group of humans could do to stop that for the moment. It's that sort of powerlessness and...
But if you could see one coming from 30 years away...
Yeah,
you would start to do everything you possibly could to work out how to prevent it.
Would you? You might, but would society?
Well, if you're talking about an actual asteroid, an actual meteor, an actual thing that's definitely coming to...
Not definitely, but there's a above 50% chance that it's going to hit the Earth and going to wipe out most of the species.
Well, I'm pretty sure that they would do massive things about it because it would destroy their consumerist capitalist society and their ability to make money because it would take them with it.
That's the thing. This would as well. However,
in their lifetime?
Well, that's the point. Most of their lives are going to be lived whilst they can get as much as they can out of this consumerist society. And then, whilst they're waiting to die, they have the money to prepare.
Maybe humanity is essentially self-destructive.
I mean, it's sort of. I mean, you get to a similar point with nuclear weapons, which I believe we have a topic on at some point in like
Ace.
2021, probably, because I've planned far too far ahead. But that was because we moved to the 2-week thing, and that moved it like way ahead. But it's sort of, we don't like to think about these really massive existential threats, and we sort of assume that because none of us would want that, because, well, it would mean the end of us, but it would also mean the end of everything we've ever known.
We trust people with power to deal with those things on our behalf.
Yeah. However, we're getting to a situation where, I mean, it has gotten to situations in the past, a fairly recent past, where we have been really close to nuclear war, and that would likely mean the annihilation of most life on Earth.
But that I think is where the change is coming, that we have trusted the people with power to deal with those massive existential crisis kind of,
but we're sort
the
of
things that the whole human race is.
Section of a rise of populism and fascism.
This is an interesting thing, though.
An existential threat, which is sort of like an irresponsibility collision.
The rise of and the democratization of knowledge, has that not made it a lot easier now for? I mean, like, the problem is you've got the people who are in power who would very much like to keep the rest of us in the dark about what's really going on, but you've also got a lot of people who have power in terms of knowledge who are saying, well, yeah, but this is what the scientific facts are. Yeah. And it's like almost like you've got two sides. You've got people who know the science and know the facts and can provide the data and the conclusive evidence that this is happening now. And there's other people who have the power of money and the power to lobby and to kind of, I suppose, manipulate minds.
But here comes a sort of, I guess, philosophical point. Even if you were the wisest person in the universe, but had no method of actually transferring any of that knowledge, then that dies with you.
Well, I think that's why we're kind of seeing now that there is this effort. There seems to be much more of an effort now for those people who have that expertise and the scientific know-how to actually connect with everyday people and try to convey the truth of what they're saying in a way that can be understood. The communication of that knowledge is becoming almost more important than the knowledge itself, at least as important, because, like you say, that knowledge is worthless if you can't tell anyone about it and you can't influence anyone's behavior based on what that knowledge means. I mean, it's no good 97% of the world's scientists agreeing that we're in deep shit if nobody else on the planet can understand or listen to them.
It's not that nobody else understands or listens to it, it's that the people not enough people in power actually care. There is a certain amount of pure denialism, but there's also just sort of maybe they're just exaggerating a bit.
Do you think, I mean, obviously there are some people who deliberately want to keep the truth hidden, as maybe for whatever justification, to avoid panic or whatever. But do you think people?
There are a lot of reasons for that.
But do you think somebody, say, like Donald Trump, do you think he actually believes what he says, or do you think he knows that he's misleading people, but believes that he's doing the right thing for himself? Do you think he's just essentially selfish?
Yeah, I think that it's a shameless piece of shit that's done whatever he could to get into this position of power, because, kids are raised in America on this idea of, I'm going to be president.
But do you think he's clever enough to know what he's doing, or do you think he actually believes what he says?
No, he's been absolutely guided along the way by really shady advisors that he just hasn't had the dignity that most politicians have.
So you don't think he's evil then? You think he's gullible?
No, I just think that he's shameless.
Because the thing is, if he believes what he says, then he's not actually evil.
I don't think he actually cares.
He's just stupid.
He doesn't care about the impact of his actions
right,
on anyone but him.
Yeah.
It's sort of, as long as I get to be a really powerful guy, it feels like, I get the nuclear button, I can do whatever I want.
Do you know, I heard him doing this speech today about that. You know that head of ISIS that's just been killed, Abu somebody al-Baghdadi, can't remember his name, but he was doing the press conference announcing that, and I just felt so uncomfortable with the ridiculous, what would you call it, choice of language that he was using. That it was almost too over the top. It was like, they'd chased him down this dead end tunnel, and he'd taken his 3 kids with him, and he was wearing a suicide vest, and as they chased him down this tunnel, he was crying and weeping hysterically as he was being chased by these American soldiers, and eventually he sacrificed himself, taking his children with him. But that whole kind of, the whole bit about he was crying and weeping hysterically as he was being chased by us heroic warriors of the Western world, it was just like really? I mean,
the camera's gone.
I don't think we're going to be much longer, are we?
No. It's sort of, I mean, that's the thing with like a fanatical devotion to him, whilst...
But it becomes a caricature of himself.
Yeah, but here's the thing, no matter what he does, he just doesn't fucking care. That's the thing, most people have the moral sense to actually care about the legacy that he just doesn't fucking care.
But I think what scares me, coming back to the fear aspect of it, and the same thing applies with Boris Johnson, is the point at which, obviously, to a point, you have to bring a certain proportion of society with you to actually support you and believe in what you're doing, and you have to
how they do that.
But it has to be a gradual process. At what point do you realise that you have enough of a dedicated following to be able to go full Hitler?
If it was likely to succeed, they would do that, I think, because they just do not actually care about.
But you look at the way they are,
but those within their immediate social circles and themselves.
But you look at the way they are now and compare it to the political world 10, 20 years ago, and you realise they've actually made incremental steps in that direction.
That's what
constantly.
Advisors told them was most likely to succeed.
So at what point do they then feel safe enough to just go full on?
Now. I mean, last few years have been
could be interesting tomorrow.
Kind of proof of that.
Could be interesting tomorrow. Well, the next goodness sake, we keep saying it's interesting times, but it continues to be, doesn't it? And we shall see what happens. But I am genuinely scared, not just at our own abdication of responsibility in terms of not just political pacts that we've made, like international climate change treaties, but the fact that it's reduced to that, and that it's reduced to, I mean, it scares me that it doesn't matter what the rest of the world does. If places like America decide they're not going to take part in that, they're going to continue to pursue a fossil fuel agenda and investing in that. I mean, that we had funds that were supposed to be invested in green energy, millions and millions of pounds, I don't know if it was millions or billions from Britain, that were supposed to be directed towards green energy projects in South America. I think it was Argentina, and they've basically been diverted to investment in fossil fuels development. Now, today, in 2019, with all this shit going on, and we're one of the people that are still in the climate change agreement. Okay. So if America decides they're going to not do that, they're still going to affect the whole world.
The only people that didn't actually sign the Paris Climate Accords in 2015, which I believe was when they were actually proposed, or at least proposed for signing, were Syria and Nicaragua at the time. The US has since pulled out. I think Nicaragua joined, or I think Syria joined since. Nicaragua didn't join because they didn't think it went far enough, and Syria didn't join because of understandable reasons to do with the fucking civil war going on.
But the West's saying, well, it doesn't matter if we don't, what we do if India and China don't get on board. But actually, China's doing a lot better with electric cars and the development of the infrastructure there than we are.
I mean, you can say that, but also they are doing shit still.
Yeah.
But it's sort of just, there's too many people there. But also, it is important to keep human rights in mind in this, and through that, I'm never going to give any respect to China until they change.
Did we address fear?
Yeah, this is a weird thing to bring up quickly. The fear-mongering by the tabloids in the UK, particularly.
Fuck them.
I mean, you get all the stuff about, X causes cancer and all that, but particularly want to talk about the fear drummed up around trans people.
I haven't paid particular attention to it because it's not that much of an issue to me, but I'm sure you probably have. I would say, I went up to get the beer for this podcast, and this is not related to trans, but I would say I just hate the tabloids. Because the front page of one of them tonight, I noticed, I never buy one, but I always pay attention to what they say on the front, and it's saying, "Do not hold our country hostage anymore," on the front page. It's like, you're a fucking newspaper. You're not
talking to that, though?
Yeah, the people who come in to the co-op. Basically, they're trying to get money from people who feel powerless.
Are they talking about the EU there? Because it feels more,
I don't know.
like
I didn't even bother to look.
The UK government's trying to do it unsuccessfully. It's sort of like,
I think it was more aimed at kind of Parliament.
Right. What? Right. It's this sort of thing of, we want more sovereignty, but not that kind of sovereignty where our own parliament actually has decision over the laws. Fucking hell. It's more just sort of like, we just want to fuel our far-right fantasies of banning all migrants. It's like, that. Not what's actually going to happen if you give sovereignty to the UK, because
I'm two hobgoblins.
The reason that we joined the EU was because we sort of agreed
anyway,
with this.
Sorry,
Thatcher was a cunt, but
fear of transgender. One thing I would say, actually, that I'm noticing, even from my, I apologise for the fact that I am open-minded, and I'm very much into as liberal a mindset as possible, but I apologise for if I ever find it difficult to use the right words, or sometimes come across with perhaps an entrenched attitude, not because it's what I think, just because of the way the society I've been brought up in, that I'm not aware of the way I'm speaking.
Here's the thing with the way that, particularly the UK press, because the UK press is particularly bad on this, has treated this issue, is that to most people that seemed really progressive.
What I said?
From a position of ignorance, even trying to understand it. I mean, you probably know more than the vast majority of people on this issue, because it's just an issue that's not really talked about in a positive way.
Well, I think
it's sort of more,
it's habits. And it's developing newer habits that fit the reality. I mean, for instance, if you stand up in front of a room of people and you say, and you begin addressing that room of people with, "Ladies and gentlemen,"
that's the thing.
How do you move from that?
There is that
polarized,
just sort of normalization of that sort of I guess, gendered language, but
But it is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes, even if you are. I mean, I think of myself as a man.
But when you're talking about,
Unfortunately, because most of them are
the way
cunts.
that tabloids treat it, this is just full on nasty, horrible, defamatory shit, where they will claim that trans people are rapists, that they're just trying to get into.
Well, they said that about homosexuals.
That they're liars and they're corrupting children. That sort of shit that was being said about homosexuals.
Yeah, but it's not. It's less acceptable to say that about homosexuals now, unless you're in the deep south of America.
Well, that's the thing. They can sell papers by doing this with trans people because a lot of people still agree with them, which is unfortunate. But that's not going to change until the majority of newspapers do. But even some of the more surprising newspapers just say this sort of stuff. Still say this sort of stuff in a really problematic way. So, for example...
Again, it's fear of the unknown.
I think it was in the Times, the New York Times. They talked about... basically, Flora is owned by this company, Upfield, that in their website thing has a section where they say that they support diversity and inclusion. They also had a partnership with Mumsnet,
right?
Which most people probably don't know this, especially over the last few years, has become particularly synonymous with really transphobic content.
Right.
It's not necessarily sort of the central board because it's like a forum thing for mums, but it's this sort of masked as fear for children, really transphobic stuff. So they, as a trans person, trans activist, basically tweeted them, messaged them that this is the sort of stuff that's on Mumsnet. Maybe you shouldn't be partnering with this.
Yeah.
Maybe you shouldn't be partnering with Mumsnet anymore if you claim to be diverse. And they actually broke off partnership. That's a really good thing because quite a lot of companies just ignore this sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's happening more with the oil companies as well, sponsoring arts organisations now. That they're pulling, they're places like the RSC, and there was a demonstration at the, I think it was the National Art Gallery, is it? I'm not sure. They're sponsored by BP. There's a demonstration there because, But
the way that
there is that shaming.
I mean, this isn't necessarily as horrible as a lot of the tabloids get. The way that this was covered in the Time was that trans people were boycotting Flora. But instead it was just this one person and probably a few more people messaging along with them to Flora, basically showing them why they shouldn't do this.
Yeah. Rather
than boycotting. In response, actually the people on Mumsnet boycotted them instead. But they didn't cover that in that way because that doesn't sell as much, because it's sort of this... They sort of want to get across this message that trans people have a lot of power, which they really don't.
Why? Yeah, I mean, this is Piers Morgan's tactic, isn't it? That there is that kind of, it's that sensationalist divisiveness that gets an audience, and it's like, just fuck off and be nice to people.
I saw an article in the Telegraph that legitimately could have come from Nazi Germany, where, I mean, it was interestingly actually a trans person writing this, and I think it was sort of from a perspective of being fed up, but I think the editors probably wanted to make it as, they're trans, so they can't be transphobic, you can't criticise them for that, which you absolutely can, because black people can be racist. They said that to solve all this dispute around it's sort of, there's this sort of fake fear that's actually not really supported by any evidence that men that aren't trans will go into women's changing rooms and exploit them somehow. I mean, I'm not sure. Actually.
We have unisex changing rooms in Huntley without a problem.
Well, that's the point, that we have these. These sorts of people are against those unisex changing rooms.
Pardon me.
I mean, they're better for trans people, but also just better for everyone because it just means that everyone can use the same facilities, and it hasn't really caused any problems.
Yeah.
All these fears are
What's
not
the issue?
supported by
Do you know what? Do you know what I think that? I mean, this boils down to. Do you know? And this is similar to the fear of the
trans
unknown.
people should carry ID cards
Fuck
to
off.
prove that they're trans rather than just someone.
But do you know
pretending
what
to be
all
trans.
of this boils down to? And it's the same across the board, not just for that, but for everything we've talked about this evening. It's not just fear of the unknown, but it's kind of connected to that. It's fear of change. It seems like not people, but it seems like it's enticing to have this feeling of comfort of things staying the same and feeling in a position of safety. And that's fine. If everybody was the same, that would work, but they're not.
Yeah.
And we're not going to survive as a species. We have never survived as a species because we stayed the same. We've survived because we've adapted. People don't want change.
Yeah.
They're scared of change because it takes them outside a comfort zone.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing, in the case of UK transphobia, it's quite specific. Have you heard of TERFs?
No.
Trans exclusionary radical feminists, basically people that use women's rights as a cover for transphobia, even though if they're being transphobic, that is automatically removing them from being pro women's rights because trans women are women. That means that they're not for all women.
I think the arts is where
Yeah,
this is going to change because I almost mentioned earlier. Me and Mum just finished watching a series called Another Life, and there are various issues approached in that series. Polygamy is one of them, but there is a character in that which, at first, I was like, "Is that a bloke or a woman?" But very quickly, like literally within a few seconds of thinking that, I was like, "Does it matter?"
Yeah, I feel like,
and it's like it doesn't actually make any difference to the character or the person. It's I mean, they actually looked to me to be very feminine. The masculine kind of aspect of them, I suppose, was that they had a slight 5 o'clock shadow, what you might call, and a deeper voice than a woman. But at the same time, they looked a lot, in their actions, they look a lot more feminine. So, but I very quickly became comfortable with, well, I don't really need to know. Why is it relevant?
Yeah, I mean, I think
unless I'm planning on becoming involved with them.
There is that sort of, I think a lot of people, myself included, with a lot of things that we're not on a regular basis exposed to, experience that sort of thinking something and then going, actually, no, you're wrong about that.
Yeah.
Like that your gut reaction is wrong. And that's okay because it shows that you actually have a fucking conscience.
But it's also revealing
sort of thinking before you speak, and then after you speak, don't get really defensive if you say something wrong.
But the other thing is it's also quite revealing of the inbuilt preconceptions that society has almost imposed on you.
Yeah, well, it's just a sort of automatic response nowadays.
Yeah. And I suppose a lot of people accept those automatic responses as the correct way, rather than questioning and thinking about everything that they, every judgment that they make. Not every judgment, but you know what I mean? There are some things that are kind of, we know are up for debate and are controversially challenged. They are the ones we should really be thinking about our own attitudes to. Such as, like you say, trans issues. I mean, sexuality is becoming quite passé now, isn't it? I mean, same-sex marriage is legal in many countries now. That would have been, it's not that long ago people were being chemically castrated for being homosexual,
Whilst I would say that in regards to my own sexuality has changed how some of my relationships might work.
Yeah.
However, it's much subdued way to what it would likely be in the 80s and
Yeah.
even up to
Well, it was
2000s.
peddled as a toxic threat then.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, imagine being someone that believed that whole time and then going, oh, actually, I'm gay.
I had a friend.
A toxic threat.
I had a friend. This was when I was about 10, probably, at school. I had a friend who was the son of a religious pastor, if you like, a captain in the Sally Army, who now lives in America and hates gays. Basically, thinks that they're all going to go to hell. But he told me at the age of 10 that if your willy goes anywhere near your bum, if it touches your bum, you will die. That was what I was told at the age of 10 by a friend of mine. That if your willy goes to, comes into contact with your own bum, that you will die. I mean, what the fuck? That was 1980, 81, something like that.
It's easy.
That was the norm then.
Laugh at that sort of.
I got told if you swallowed chewing gum, it would wrap around your heart and you would die.
Yeah, there is a lot of.
Well, that happened to me.
Urban myth things, but
that's happened to me twice actually.
Was it?
Yeah.
You died twice.
Yeah.
It's interesting listening to gay people that grew up gay during that time, realizing that they were gay as they were chanting those sort of schoolyard taunts at each other, and realize, oh, hang on, I'm actually this. That's really fucking scary. It's sort of this irrational fear that's been drummed up.
Yeah.
And when someone realizes that actually that's me,
I think
don't realize that there's no actual reason to be afraid of that because that's me and there's nothing wrong with me, that it gets to a situation where you're scared of yourself and you're taught to hate yourself.
I think sometimes the people that are most against gays on the surface are perhaps the most jealous because they're not actually. I mean, I don't have a problem with gays. Sometimes I wish I was. I've tried to be, but I'm not. But at the same time, it doesn't bother me in any way. Pardon me. They just seem to have more fun and they seem more relaxed and happy with life. But it's just kind of. I feel like if you're really fighting back against it and you hate it, it's like you're jealous that they've had the freedom to admit it and you can't break free from the constraints that you've been.
But I would ask you to consider that the reason that they might seem a lot more carefree nowadays is because they never would have been able to be like that. All their relationship would have had to be in secret.
Yeah. Almost like they're still celebrating.
I mean, that's the...
We're free.
That's the
Mind
point
you.
of pride, really.
Mind you, no, you say that, but have you ever heard of
celebrating?
Have you ever heard of a 1970s sitcom called Are You Being Served?
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
John Inman, and this was, I don't know, this possibly would have been back when, I don't know, when did homosexuality become legal in the UK?
It was at different times in the UK, so.
Well, basically, his catchphrase. I mean, he was incredibly camp. He was in charge of a department. Not in charge of, but he worked in a department store in the men's clothing section, and he used to walk around with a tape measure around his neck, and he was very, very camp. And his catchphrase was "I'm free," and that was like in the 70s. That "I'm free" kind of. In other words. That is the embodiment of what you were just saying, is that he felt able to be himself because he wasn't constrained by the role that society said that he should be. And he was everyone's favourite character. He was the most famous character in that show.
But I feel like a lot of people then liked that because it was sort of dancing on the edge of what seemed okay at the time. However,
but he was fictional.
It was played for jokes.
Almost taken a bit like Blacking Up with the black and white minstrels.
Yeah, it was a comedy character.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure John Inman was gay anyway, but...
And we're seeing it's a very similar story with trans people now, where throughout media in the 70s and 80s and stuff, they would have barely been portrayed at all.
Yeah.
But like 2000s and even 2010s, it's sort of to the point where it was in the 70s with gay people, where they're still being played for laughs.
I'm going to risk your wrath now and suggest we wind up soon because I really need a piss.
Okay,
but
well,
I would say I have a couple of very important points to make before we finish. One is, this is about fear. Don't be scared of gay people or trans people.
Yeah.
Be scared of climate change.
Yeah.
And be scared of the political climate that we're in. But not so much that it paralyses you.
I do find it interesting that it's the same.
Do something about it. Don't be scared to do it.
That are saying, that's sort of drumming up fear about LGBT people and people of other races and ethnicities that are completely denying the threat, actual imminent existential threat.
We're scared of all the shit that's not worth being scared of.
Well, it's sort of that has a face. It's easy to target.
Well, actually, at the risk of starting things up, but it won't because I'm just going to make it brief. But one of the defining precepts of Extinction Rebellion, which I, as you well know, I'm fully in support of, is dealing with grief being the first thing. And one of the stages of grief, one of the well-known stages of grief, the first stage is denial. We're witnessing the planet dying because of us. A lot of people are in that first stage at the moment.
I can't remember who first proposed this, but there's these quite famous 5 stages of grief that are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. Yeah.
And they tried, I think, I haven't been to any sort of gatherings as such. I've done an online, video conference, which was nice. Some nice people locally, just a local thing.
I feel like there are still a lot of people still in the denial stage, but I feel like I'm sort of dancing between 2 and 4.
I think they try to move, not forcibly, but they try to enable you to move through those stages as quickly as is comfortable for you so that you can get to the part where you get to acceptance, because it's only at that point in the journey that you can actually do something about it.
Yeah, it's sort of,
you've got to go through those stages.
You're just purely raging at it, and whilst you're just purely down on it, and whilst you're trying to figure out a way of doing it without actually really doing it, it's sort of, once you've accepted that it's a problem but aren't depressed or angry about it, just want to get something.
Like, I've accepted that unless we change as a species, we're all going to die.
And realise that
what do we need to do to change now?
One of those people that step up.
Yeah, and it only takes 2 or 3% of the population to actually make a stand and be unfortunately disruptive to among everyone else. I'm sorry to everybody else, but I will probably at some point be out there saying sorry, but I want to save all your lives.
This hasn't really been a Halloweeny special, has it?
Well, modern day horror, this. Well,
we have
close
talked about like Halloween Horror Nights and stuff like that.
Yeah, I do like a bit of horror. You're not so much of a fan, are you? No. But I do like a bit of horror.
I mean, we should be wrapping up soon, definitely. But
it explores the darker side of my psyche without actually destroying the planet in the process.
The thing that I find most interesting, actually, is the music.
Yeah, but they often steal classical stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, classical stuff is full of like doom and gloom and dread. But incidentally, I mean, I did.
That was a comment on the political climate at the time.
Last night, very early in the morning, try adding stuff to my higher composition for music. That was a Gregorian chant that was used in like funeral marches, but it's been used in loads of films since, and in some classical pieces as well. One
of which is notably
what?
The Shining.
Yeah, I mean that's the main theme for that. It's I mean, most people probably don't know the notes off by heart, but you might be able to sing it.
Bum,
F, E, F, D.
bum, 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 bum.
I mean, it's just those first 4 notes.
F E F
It's been
D.
used in loads of things like Harry Potter, Star Wars. It's a Wonderful Life. Spoiler alert! Although it's a movie from the 40s, so you've had your chance to watch it. One of the characters is about to commit suicide, and that music played. It's just a sort of general signatory of dread, and I just find it interesting how music. It's just sort of these uncomfortable thing. I mean, the thing that's.
I'm getting really scared now.
It's the uncomfortable thing with that is that if you can picture a mental piano, if you know what a piano looks like, F to E is a half step, which sounds a bit off.
Oh my God!
Brain, and that makes it sort of a bit spooky. And scary.
don't stick, because I really need the toilet. And I'm just going to say, if you're going to start talking half steps, get into Indian music, because they do use quarter tones.
Ooh, interesting.
Have you ever seen a quarter tone piano? Right, we're going to go off air because I'm going to show you a quarter tone piano.
Okay, right.
And I think there were even more intricate versions of that.
Wrap up so that you can go.
Yes, please do, because I'm scared that I'm going to urinate live on air.
I've been Fireball.
I've been the Orbiter.
It's been our Halloween special.
I'm scared I'm going to piss myself.
Broken Bollocks episode 47. Fear.
Bye.
Jinx.
Good grief. Run.
You can't talk now.
We've finished.
I jinxed you.
No. But I don't care. You don't scare me.
Jinx.
I'm going to stop the audio recording. Say something. Say something profound.
I'm gonna eat your soul.
This podcast is part of the After Dark Podcast Network.